Go ahead, Diane.
Great. Okay, I hope my slideshow is now showing, correct?
Yep, it's up.
Lovely. Okay. Welcome everyone to my session today. My name is Diane Sieber. I'm a professor in the College of Engineering at the University of Colorado Boulder. I'm also a gamer, and that probably was the reason why I was open to trying some things that I hear lots of us are trying. So I'm very happy to be here to share with you what's going on in the College of Engineering. And in the HERPS program for Engineering, Ethics, and Society, which I direct. So that's my introduction. What would you like to inform people of? Okay, well, since I'm not hearing of anything else you need to tell people, I'm going to get started. Welcome, everyone. This is a strange experience to be talking to a virtual world. And also, the presentation I'm giving today addresses that, except that we're not all sitting in World of Warcraft. So that's what going to be the big difference for me in terms of how I normally teach and how I'm presenting this. So my topic is game-based learning communities for belonging. And today, what I wanted to do was discuss 3 different kinds of projects that I've been working on for 3 different types of game-based learning communities. The first that I'll talk about is an in-game, completely run in World of Warcraft team learning experience, which involves challenges within the World of Warcraft universe and also debriefs using Zoom. The second is embodied classrooms for learning. So this would be classes, particularly seminars that are taking place in other worlds. World of Warcraft and Minecraft are the 2 examples I've brought, but there also are a number of other things we've tried. And then finally, a third type of community, which is extracurricular. So these would be either persistent worlds where people can drop by, or open worlds which have appointments, mentoring spaces where we have TAs who are available at certain times of day. The examples I'll bring today are primarily from World of Warcraft and Minecraft, but Red Dead 2 has turned out to be a really great place for this sort of gathering as well. And also in that context, I'll talk about playing together remotely. So first, I need to say exactly what I mean by belonging. And there's been a great deal of research in this area. There really are 2 primary areas that I think are particularly relevant here, and they're social belonging and academic belonging. Achieving both of these is already a pretty big challenge in face-to-face contexts. In fact, at the University of Colorado Boulder, belonging in both of these forms is among the strongest predictors for retention and persistence of students over time. So we were already very concerned about belonging before we ended up all going remote, and that's become even more urgent in the past 1.5 years. So social belonging, when I talk about it, involves the sense of fitting in, of feeling connected, of knowing somebody you can borrow notes from, knowing someone you can eat a meal with, knowing somebody you could ask for help. That is feeling like you have a social network, whether it is strong or weak, doesn't matter. It's the feeling that there are people you could go to. And at the end of this, I'll post the full references to the text that I'm working with as I talk about these definitions. And then academic belonging is also fitting in, but in a slightly different way. So this would be sensing that you're on the same academic level as others, and in particular, feeling mutually supportive. So this is not just I feel supported, but I am equally a partner in supporting others, and that this is a mutual relationship. We're equals. The heightened challenge in a remote learning environment, I'm sure, is painfully obvious to all of us. The fact that we are trying to help students who are socially and geographically isolated at the same time that we were trying to get them to feel like they belong, that there really are no real world gathering spaces allowed. So places of belonging have disappeared. We have limited socialization in residence halls and in public spaces like the lobby of engineering, which was the primary place where people met in the past. We've lost the coffee shop, the water cooler, the computer lab, the game arcade, any of the spaces that created any kind of serendipitous discovery or informal connecting with others. So it has become paramount in classes for us to be able to connect students, for them to feel like they belong both academically and socially to a community that cares about them. The first project I want to talk about is a project that was designed prior to the shutdown, and it was to address a common problem in the College of Engineering, which is that our students need to work in teams. Some of them have group projects that they engage with in their first semester. Many of them don't really think about how to work in a group until later on in their college careers. And we wanted to come up with a method of teaching them to work better in teams, particularly how to communicate better in teams, in order to improve their entire trajectory through the College of Engineering and then in their careers later. So we teamed with a company, a private company in California called Pluralistic Networks, that trains executives to lead better and to lead teams better. And they had been training executives through using World of Warcraft, and this seemed like a really interesting idea to us. So we got together with them, we designed a curriculum that is a semester-length lab component that teams with first-year courses. It's 10 weeks so that we have a couple of weeks to start up and a couple of weeks to wind down when they have projects due for other classes. And the students involved are divided into teams of 5. These were freshmen. And each team of 5 has a trained student mentor. We spent last year training TA students who are between sophomores and seniors who would be the guides for these teams of freshmen. So in addition to their regular course requirements, their lab involved meeting for 2 hours a week in World of Warcraft to perform challenges and also to debrief. And this is the key part. So of the 2 hours, between 1 and 1.5 hours is challenges, starting with the parallel play of having things that each individual could do alone. They don't really need each other. And then moving through a dungeon where they actually have to play roles and they have to be mutually supportive. And then finally to a major dungeon challenge that is a surprise, so they can't prepare in advance. The debrief, varying between half an hour and an hour, takes place on Zoom. And so we've had them log into World of Warcraft, turn on Zoom, turn off their video in Zoom. They're all engaged in gameplay. Their mentor is listening to all of their discussions and watching what they're doing. And then the debrief, they close down the game, they turn on their video in Zoom, and they have a discussion. And then accompanying this, weekly brief readings and written reflection questions round out their experience of their goals in the program. And this will give you a sense of the kinds of skills that we're trying to get them to practice in-game in order for them to be better working in teams. The process, like I mentioned, is reading in advance, a challenge and debrief during playtime, and then a reflection post playtime, which is written. And the main things that we're talking about with them in these debriefs are how to make and respond to requests. This is something that seems really self-evident, except we don't do such a great job with this either. When we ask for something, are we really clear about what we're asking? Is it clear that it's a question? When somebody asks and they're unclear, do we respond in a way that acknowledges that we heard a request? Likewise, making and responding to offers, an offer of help, making and receiving assessments. somebody expresses a view of how something is going or what your performance is like. We're also fairly awkward at this and do it about once a year during annual evaluation times. Making and understanding assertions. We announce things all the time that are opinions, but often we announce them hoping that we're going to solicit some kind of response or maybe a change in someone's behavior. How do we do that clearly? And then how do we listen for what the real concern of the person making the assertion is? And for freshmen, particularly important is identifying and working with our moods. Being able to identify what mood you're in and how it's affecting your behavior, what mood you hear in the group and how it's affecting the group's performance. And through all of this, cultivating trust, confidence, and positive interdependence that runs and grows throughout the semester. So that's fundamentally the structure of it. And the in-game experience, you know, here's a team, they show up, they're interacting with bears, they go on quests. And the fundamental important thing about this is it's free because the first 20 levels of World of Warcraft are. So we get all of them scaffolded for this. We have them download World of Warcraft. We get them in for free on their trial. And then we don't go above level 20. And we assign only the kinds of quests that can be executed at those levels. The last dungeon is the borderline reach. So it's sort of the outer limits of flow, almost bordering on anxiety, so that they really feel like they've taken on a challenge they didn't think they could meet. So, oops, I need to step back. Well, I guess I won't step back. So a couple of the things that we've found so far. We've run this pilot twice. Once last fall with 82 students, this spring with upper division students in a more limited way. So there are only 35 students this spring. We have 10 TAs who are guiding the groups. And among the things we found that weren't exactly what we anticipated, first, we did notice that there was an increased confidence in teamwork and an increased sense of belonging to a group of students that these freshmen don't even live with. But what was really interesting to us was the collateral benefits that we had not seen coming. For example, we saw an increase in student success correlated behaviors. By that, I mean students who are willing to ask for help, which is not something that students are coming into engineering very comfortable with. Students who are ready to accept help, another thing that we really have wanted to have be part of the culture. And also that failure can be learning as opposed to catastrophic and something worth hiding. So all of those things really were beneficial overall. And then also this sense of belonging that we hadn't thought through that this might be an effect. Comments by the students like the team has my back, spill over to social connection beyond the lab time. So these groups were sometimes just meeting over the weekend to play, or they were meeting in World of Warcraft to talk. Meeting students across residence halls, majors, states, but all pursuing engineering. Turned out that this was a really interesting way to create community when we didn't have other physical ways to do so. And finally, we saw an improved sense of self, one's moods, how those moods impact one's learning, how those moods impact those around you. So all of these benefits suggest to us that the pilot continues and we're also going to grow. Next fall, we plan to reach 300 students, and the ultimate goal is for all of our freshmen, which will be 1,200 students in a couple of years, to experience this lab as part of their freshman classes. Yeah, so I'll stop talking about it there because I want to leave time for questions. And also, the other issue that has come up as a result of us being virtual has been that this grid that I'm looking at, in fact, it's even worse. I see a list of names, but I don't even see video right now. this grid that we're working with in our classes is not particularly conducive to community. To my generation, it feels like the Brady Bunch and people all kind of looking at each other, but it's very hard to feel like you have a seminar table with people openly discussing with each other. It's very hard to feel like these are all individuals who could move about a room, that there are different ways that we could be interacting than sitting in boxes and staring at each other. So I began playing with embodied classrooms. This is something that I used to do 15 years ago in Second Life, which I remember very fondly. And it turns out that a lot of students are in World of Warcraft or have experience with it. And my seminars in philosophy, game development, Golden Age literature from Spain have been meeting in World of Warcraft and Minecraft. Not every class, but frequently enough, often once a week, so that we do get a sense of each other, as physical beings. One of our favorite places to meet is the Lion's Pride Inn, which is in the noob zone as soon as you log in. And at certain times of day, it's very quiet. Thankfully, during my class period, it was. And there are lots of places to sit in front of the fire and have a class discussion. In order to set something like this up, you do have to scaffold a fair amount in advance. So I have students download the free trial of World of Warcraft. I provide some parameters. For example, you have to be human. That way you will be able to meet in the same location. I provide a server, in our case, Teneris, so that they all know which server they should log into in order to show up in the right place. And then we've used either Zoom or Discord for voice communication. So if they mute World of Warcraft and we don't hear all of the noises from it, all we hear is each other's voices. And we can even face each other and talk. And it is extraordinary what a difference that makes on occasion to feel like we're co-present, even though we're not. There are lots and lots of quiet spaces in games like World of Warcraft, places that nobody seems to explore. North Shore Abbey, which is right at the beginning also of the human noob adventure, has an upstairs that no one is in. And there are rooms, there's a library. All of the rooms that are off this main corridor with the stained glass windows are empty, and it's possible for everyone to sit down and talk. And just get a sense of each other as others. The fact that this feels more immersive adds a little bit of urgency to the conversation. You get more of a sense of eye contact. It gives some sense of agency. So if people move around, we know it. If people feel like they're part of a circle, they're more likely to be engaged, even if they know they're not literally there. And it also gives a certain playful realism that encourages what Bernard Suits has called a illusory attitude, a playfulness, openness that spills over into the discussion itself of ideas. So that has made a real shift in the way my classes can operate, because we do have a sense of each other as others, as people, as physical beings. There's also another level of the embodied classroom that I think is even more valuable. And that is thanks to Minecraft. Almost all of my students are in Minecraft, but you can get a free trial through Minecraft Education to try this out. And my students built sets for us to meet inside that had to do with the topic of the class. In this case, we were studying Spanish Golden Age theater, and Don Quixote visits a theater. And in Minecraft, a student built the Corral del Príncipe, which was the main theater in Madrid in the 17th century. So, not only was this an opportunity for us to walk through it, to understand it as a space, to think about theatricality, performance, what the proxemic sense of the space is, but also we were able to sit down in the theater and talk about the theater. There were a number of great examples of this. In fact, in this class, every student decided that they wanted for part of their project to be to build one of the spaces within which we were operating. So here are a couple of other examples. The Castle of the Dukes, and the outside and the inside. We could meet in the courtyard near the fountain and talk about book 2 of Don Quixote, and of course the windmills, which we were able to walk around and interact with, and try to figure out how they might look like giants. So the idea that first we had a space to work in and we could be around each other discussing things within the space. We could walk through the space, but also the students themselves thought about the spaces enough to build them. Changed pretty radically the way we were able to think about literature. So the three-dimensionality of it, but also the need to think through what a space would be, was really valuable, and again, created a level of urgency. This is a different class in which we were analyzing game worlds. The class is Games and Education. And these are just 3 examples of game worlds that students decided were important enough that they wanted to explain how they worked to other students. So instead of trying to get into Left 4 Dead or Legend of Zelda or BioShock Infinite, they rebuilt the spaces that most mattered to them in Minecraft so that we could meet there, hold our class there, and discuss the details of the world, and think through how they were designed, how they function, and what makes a good game, and how does one learn in games. The third type of project I wanted to bring up has to do with extracurricular spaces. So far, I've spoken about a lab component that is attached to classes, and I've talked about teaching classes within a game environment. But this third example is slightly different and turns out to be a bit more important to my students. So that is, what are the extracurricular spaces that we've lost, but that we could somehow try to recover through different means, either meeting in games or even by using Zoom. So I've sort of organized these in terms of levels of difficulty. So the easiest non-game way to do this is to open up Zoom hours for co-working. I started off having office hours that were open in the evenings so that a student could drop by and ask a question. And as of last week, over half the class is just dropping by every evening, and they're doing their work while they're on screen, and then they can ask questions of each other. They're working on calculus. They're asking questions about things that aren't part of the class, but we have regular appointments to just hang out. And that has been transformative for what we do in the classroom, that we have that space outside. Zoom-based gameplay, game nights. When I should have mentioned, I lived in a dorm for the last 7 years. I just moved out in July this last year. And in the dorm, we used to hold game nights. So Tuesdays and Fridays, we would have 100 different games out in our common room, and people would show up and play them and stay for hours. So how does one do this differently if you're not allowed to gather? The first thing that we discovered as a class in the Games and Education class was that there are lots of printable games. So I've given you the example here of Ironclad. I'll post a link to it in the chat when I'm finished, which is a game designed to be, you can make it very easily and you can play it with any game pieces that happen to be sitting around. This is an example of checkers and stones. It could be beans and quarters, however you wish to approach it. This is something that you can print out wherever you happen to be, and you can play online with each other through Zoom or Discord or you name it. The other is shareable games. Card games in particular, almost everyone has cards, so it's possible to develop and play lots and lots of games online, but also board games to distribute. Since most of my students are physically in Boulder, they can drop by campus to pick up a board game and then show up at board game night with their own copy of the board game. One of our favorites is Pandemic. It turns out many of the students own it, but also I had 5 or 6 copies of it as part of the program that I ran. So we were able to all set up our own boards and play with each other. These games have really helped, I think, with building a community and a sense of we are all in this together, a sense of belonging to this group. Persistent constructed spaces. So all of those spaces I already showed you that students built in Minecraft, they rotate through, just saying, you know, I'll be in the castle or I'll be at the base of windmill number 1 between this time and this time on Monday nights, drop by. And I had assumed that people were tired of being online and that this would probably be pretty not busy, that there would be cricket noises or something. But interestingly, there are groups of people who are showing up every week to meet in particular physically constructed places because it feels good. They like the way the world feels and they like the people who show up because they're also interested in that world. Finally, regular event-based gathering in games. So for example, if I announce to my class, on Tuesday nights, I'm going to be in Northrend or Stormwind, and if you want to show up, we'll run an adventure together. So I've learned something interesting from the labs that we ran with World of Warcraft, which is that having people show up and engage in just one raid with each other, even if it only lasts half an hour, it absolutely improves our sense of belonging to a group that is persistent over time. So I think all of these different approaches, which, you know, some of them are pretty heavy duty in a game, others are pretty light in terms of touch. I think all of these together can create all sorts of different ways to belong through different media. I wanted to just finish with fishing in World of Warcraft. Something else that we like to do is to gather at a particular pond and fish and have a conversation. So I don't have to be there as the professor. Mentors don't even necessarily have to be there. The students seem to be perfectly happy guiding their own conversations in this world, especially now that they already know them. So eventually, I hope we'll be back to this kind of interaction in classes. But I also feel that the kind of interactions we're seeing in games are much closer, more personal, they're smaller group, they're more persistent over time, and they don't depend on a physical classroom. And I think all of those things are incredibly valuable. So I will stop sharing. And I am here for questions, or if you have thoughts on ideas that you've tried, things that you'd like to suggest to any of us. And, you know, please let me know.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. We still got about 20 minutes or so. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute or put them in the chat.
Has accessibility been an issue with these games? Have students found it difficult? Yes and yes. Accessibility, in particular, accessibility to computers that will run World of Warcraft. The College of Engineering opened a checkout desk for technology for students who didn't have computers that would work for this pilot. That's going to have to scale if we're going to scale this up to more students. Lots of students show up with a laptop that can handle, you know, your very basic stuff, but they don't have a graphics card or the kind of speed they need to be able to run World of Warcraft, even in its beginning levels. So yes, that's been an interesting challenge. And then just understanding the mechanics of the game to participate has been in our World of Warcraft leadership lab. That's part of the exercise. Part of the reason we think that this has turned out to be so helpful is that it's hard when students are working in teams for real. It's hard for them to see and reflect on what's going on. So for example, working in teams is stressful. It provokes real emotions. And trying to figure out how to jump or run or turn in World of Warcraft also provokes strong emotions. So we're able to provoke emotions that we can then talk about. the nice thing about that lab is the debrief. Now, if we switch off to talking about using this in classes, a lot of scaffolding is needed. So I've produced guides for everything from how to find the server to how to perform basic actions to, hey, if you, by the way, want to dance, try /dance. So it takes a lot of scaffolding to get students up to speed quickly enough to do meaningful things in World of Warcraft. However, so far, every class I've taught, there have been at least 2 or 3 students who know it well and offer to help others orient themselves. So I don't have to do that work myself beyond producing the written guides. And that's been made it possible because I'm not trying to do tutorials on World of Warcraft while I'm also trying to teach courses. Trying to see. Oh, wish I was an engineering student. Yeah, me too. I want to start over, don't you? This looks so much more interesting than engineering was in the 80s when I was starting. Did students create a separate account for engaging with classmates versus using their real account? Not that I am aware of. So that's a ... I believe that they did not. The TAs didn't see any indication of alternative communication modes. Now, they did, however, open new channels in Discord, which is pretty common. So there was a lot of back channel conversation going on there that wasn't happening in the main class. I hope that actually answered the question. Let's see. How about students who have disabilities? Were there any who participated? Yes. So I have an interesting demographic when I teach in the College of Engineering, and that is that many of the students in the college who have accessibility issues are also have also worked out for themselves how to play games. So we have assistants who will work with a student who has a disability that makes it difficult to engage. We also, of course, need to provide alternatives for those students should they wish to not engage. One specific example was a student who's had multiple concussions and was simply made too nauseous by World of Warcraft as a field of engagement. So we provided an alternative lab experience for that student. I have not had that come up in a class yet, simply because we're not generally running around as a required part of the class. We're meeting, going to a very specific location and sitting in order to feel like we are in a place. There are a couple of wonderful lakes to sit by, for example, that nobody visits. Let's see. How do you define embodied and virtual learning spaces or environments? So I guess in a sense, they are the same. It's a virtual learning environment. To me, the reason I say embodied is that that's the goal is for us to feel like we have a physical presence with each other. And that is in contrast to the blocks that we occupy in Zoom. And in contrast to the fact that, we would physically be going outside to sit by Kittredge Lake on the CU Boulder campus, rather than sitting by a virtual lake in World of Warcraft. So some of this, I believe, when we have full in-person meetings again in the future, will not be nearly as significant. And then I will probably stop thinking about it as embodied so much and more as virtual. Back when we had an island in Second Life, that, it was absolutely, we considered that to be virtual education. And it was the only way that we could meet with students, for example, if we were away. So we could log in from anywhere and engage with them in Plato's Grove, for example, on our island. I used to teach with Minecraft EDU on iPads, was tricky but rewarding. Interesting. Okay, so I hadn't thought about iPads, and I really hadn't thought about that as a platform. That's a wonderful idea. The classes I talked about today, yes, they're all only for engineering majors. And that, again, might affect the way you look at the demographic of students involved in the project. Although almost all students at CU Boulder self-report to being game players. 95% of them claim to play games at least once a week. Many of those are mobile games, and they're quick mobile games. They're not immersive game worlds. So there is a fairly steep learning curve for the majority of our students trying to get them into a game world in order to engage. I have not considered Imperial Galactic Survival. However, I absolutely will. So I'm saving that reference right now so that I can look it up later. Oh, thank you. And you submitted a link. What are some of the largest concerns or problems raised by students and things we haven't solved? I think the biggest concern is it relates to the technology. So the fact that we do have students who are geographically quite separate, who can't necessarily call our IT services and have their computer looked at by somebody, you know, people's internet goes out. All of the things that we're facing as we teach online courses, remote courses right now through Zoom and other means are also present when you go into game worlds. So tech support, I think that's probably the #1 problem. We ended up having to create TA roles for people to just hold hours and provide tech support as different student groups were meeting and try to help them out in real time. But we haven't really solved that very well yet. I hope I've answered many of your questions. I am going to post right now to the chat references to the articles that I pointed you to at the beginning of the presentation. Oh, and I think, yeah, so there they all are. Hopefully they'll show up. There, I'm hoping that's visible now. How do you meet technology barriers? Are there options for making up or? Yeah, so in our group lab, that's part of the learning because they're learning to work in teams, and teams often have these problems that somebody can't meet, or at the last minute, there's a technical malfunction. So, so as part of the lab, we have the team work out how they want to go about either rescheduling or proceeding without someone and then trying to catch them up later. The team has to engage in those negotiations. Now it's quite different in my class. If everybody can't join for a class, I can't meet in a virtual space. I'm not going to do that. So I have to just declare a cutoff point at which we're not going to go into World of Warcraft or Minecraft for a class. I would love to have better solutions for that in the future.
Diane, so we had a question come in. It's up a little bit from Rebecca. I'll go ahead and read it. How do you meet technology barriers? And the second part is, are there options for making up or participate when technology hits a wall or is inaccessible?
Okay, I think that's the question I just answered. Did I not answer it clearly?
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm kind of going through the chat. And
okay, great. What areas in engineering are these classes found? So this is for everybody. The lab is meant to extend across every major in the College of Engineering. My classes that I teach are in the HERPS program for Engineering, Ethics, and Society. And they are everything from technically oriented classes through evaluation and examination of game design, designing educational games, and literature, philosophy. We read Plato and Montaigne and Cervantes and you name it in our classes. So it's wonderful to be able to experiment with games across an entire range of disciplines. And any student in engineering can take any of the classes I've mentioned. Okay. That may be sufficient for everybody, and you may get a little bit of a break now before you go to your next session. Also, I don't see that. I think maybe I tried to post too many links at once, and so my my chat is simply not going to allow me to post this. I'm going to try here. Wow, I don't seem to be able to post anything to chat, which is really frustrating.
If you post one link at a time, will it let you?
Well, I just cut it down to one link, and for some reason, it's just not happy. Let me delete everything. Okay. I will try to at least post my email address in case there are further questions that occur to you later. That showed up. Okay. Great. I'm going to try these other links again, just in case. Oh, good. They showed up this time. I'm not sure what was going wrong before. So when I referred to social belonging and academic belonging, these are two of the most influential articles on these topics. I didn't actually mention much about Nicole Lazaro's framework for designing games, educational games, 4 keys to fun, but I really recommend you watch her podcast, listen to her podcast. It's quite extraordinary. And then the Ironclad game is available at this link, and it was created for a game design textbook, Rules of Play, by Katie Salen and Eric Zimmerman.
Okay. If that's it, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.